She kept her head down as she walked, clutching the strap of her bag like it was the only thing keeping her upright. The city lights blurred, partly from the rain, partly because she refused to let the tears fall. Not here. Not in public. Not where anyone could see the bruises she tried so hard to hide beneath her oversized hoodie. But of course someone saw them. Someone always does. Tonight, though, it was the wrong someone, or the right one, depending on how fate wanted to play it. The front door of the Valenti lounge stood open a few inches, warm golden light spilling onto the soaked pavement. Lila hesitated. She didn't want to go inside. She didn't want the stares or the whispers or the questions. But she needed a place to breathe. Just for a minute. She slipped in quietly. The lounge was nearly empty, closing hour approaching. Jazz humming from old speakers, glasses clinking faintly behind the bar, faint cigarette smoke curling like ghosts. The only occupied table was in the corner booth. 3 men. Suits, sharp expressions, dark eyes. They were speaking low, too low for her to make out. But she knew enough to recognize danger when she saw it. She kept her head turned away. It didn't matter. They had already noticed her. Especially him. Dante Valenti. He watched her wipe rain off her sleeves with trembling hands. Watched the awkward way she tried to hide her face. Watched the flinch, too sharp, too practiced, when the bartender accidentally dropped an empty glass and it shattered. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Lila just wanted to blend into the corner, maybe get a water, maybe just stand by the wall until her heart stopped racing. But the bartender was already walking over. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded quickly. "Yeah. I'm fine. Just needed a minute." The bartender didn't believe her. Dante definitely didn't. "Let her be, Marco," Dante said without looking away from her. His voice was low, smooth, but laced with something cold. Something lethal. Marco backed off immediately. Lila avoided Dante's gaze, but she could feel it. Heavy. Sharp. Reading details she desperately wished no one could see. She turned to leave. She shouldn't have come here. She should have just kept walking. But as she tried to step back outside, the wind shoved the door open wider, and her hood slipped off. The dim bar light hit her face, just enough to reveal the ugly purple blooming beneath her eye. 1 second of visibility. 1 blink. That was all Dante needed. His chair scraped the floor as he stood. The other 2 men quieted instantly. Everyone felt the shift. He crossed the room slowly, hands steady at his sides, like he wasn't approaching a stranger but a scene he had expected. When he reached her, he didn't touch her, not even a finger. He simply leaned in, close enough for only her to hear. "Who hurt you?" he whispered. The softness of the question made her chest collapse inward. No anger. No judgment. Just a quiet promise buried under the words, "Tell me, and I'll handle it." Lila swallowed, stiffening. "No one. I'm fine." His eyes dropped to the bruise again. "That's not fine." "It's nothing," she insisted, voice cracking. He tilted his head slightly. "People don't get bruises like that from nothing." She didn't answer. She couldn't. He wasn't the first to ask her that question today, but he was the first one who made her feel like the answer mattered. And that terrified her. She stepped back. "I don't know you." Dante nodded slowly. "No. You don't." His voice softened further. "But I saw you. And that might be enough." Before she could respond, the entrance slammed open. Hard. A man stumbled inside, drunk, furious, dripping from the rain. Lila froze at the sound of his voice. "There you are," he spat. Her stomach dropped. Connor. The ex-boyfriend she thought she had escaped by taking the long way home. The man whose temper was worse when he was afraid of losing control. The reason for the bruise. He stormed toward her, ignoring the entire room. "What did I tell you about walking out on me?" he snarled. Dante's men shifted immediately, their hands twitching toward their jackets. "Boss?" one murmured. Dante didn't answer. He just watched the scene unfold with the focus of a predator waiting to choose the moment to strike. Connor grabbed her wrist, hard enough to make her gasp. "Let's go." She tried to pull back. "Connor, stop, please." "I don't want to." He raised his hand. He wasn't going to hit her. Not here. Not in front of witnesses. He was going to drag her out. Or he thought he was. Because Dante moved. No warning. No dramatic shout. Just an invisible snap of a line inside him. In 2 steps he was at Connor's side, one hand clamping around the man's wrist with calm precision. Connor yelped in pain. "What the?" "You're done touching her," Dante said quietly. "Now take your hand back before I break it." Connor twisted, but Dante's grip tightened, unmoving, unshakable. Lila's breath hitched as she watched Dante's expression shift, not angry, just absolutely certain of what came next. "Let go of me," Connor barked. Dante's voice remained smooth. "I will. After you apologize." "Apologize? To who?" "To the woman whose face you bruised." Dante leaned in slightly. "And to everyone here who has to look at the kind of man you turned out to be." Connor sputtered. "This is none of your damn business." Wrong words. Very wrong. Dante twisted his wrist, not enough to break it, but enough to make Connor collapse to his knees with a choked cry. Lila gasped. Stop, please. You're hurting him." Dante looked at her. Just a brief glance. And the moment he did, something softened in his face. He released Connor instantly. Connor scrambled back, clutching his wrist, glaring at both of them. "This isn't over," he hissed. Dante's eyes went cold. "Yes. It is." Connor hesitated, swallowed, then backed out of the lounge. The moment the door slammed shut behind him, Dante turned back to Lila. "You didn't deserve that," he said quietly. She looked up at him, voice trembling. "Why do you care?" He let out a slow exhale. "Because someone should." She expected him to walk away. Instead, he signaled to Marco. "Get her a towel. Something warm to drink." "Dante, you don't have to, I know," he said. "But I will." When Marco hurried off, Dante stepped slightly closer. "I'll ask again. And I want you to answer honestly this time." His voice was low, steady, devastatingly sincere. "Who hurt you?" She opened her mouth, but before a single word could escape, the door burst open again. This time it wasn't Connor. It was 5 men. Drenched. Hard-faced. Eyes locked directly on Dante. Marco whispered under his breath, "Boss, that's her ex's brothers." And suddenly Lila realized, by midnight, every man connected to her ex, every man who had ever hurt her, would be looking over his shoulder. Because Dante Valenti had just made this personal. The men fanned out the moment they entered, their steps muddying the polished floor. The tallest one, broad shoulders, shaved head, jaw tight enough to crack, pointed straight at Lila with a glare that made her stomach twist. "You ran your mouth," he growled. "Connor called us. Says some rich bastard thinks he can put hands on family." Dante didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't even show the slightest hint of concern. He simply lifted his glass from the nearest table, took a slow sip, and set it back down with deliberate calm, like 5 angry men weren't storming into his lounge at all. Marco and the other staff began backing away, ducking behind the bar for cover. Dante's men stepped into place immediately, silent shadows ready for violence. Every breath in the room grew tight, stretched thin like glass about to shatter. Lila could barely breathe. "Please don't," she whispered. Dante's eyes flicked to her, and his voice lowered to a murmur only she could hear. "You're safe. Let me handle this." The tall brother took a threatening step forward. "You think you're untouchable? You mess with one of us, you mess with all of us." Dante nodded once, slowly. "Then come closer. Let's see how many of you walk out." The man spat on the floor. "You don't know who you're dealing with." Dante finally stepped forward, just one step, but it changed the entire atmosphere, like the air pressure dropped. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," he said softly. "A group of cowards covering for another coward." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The tallest brother lunged. He didn't get far. Dante caught him by the front of the jacket, yanked him forward, and slammed him face first into a table so hard the wood cracked. The man crumpled to the floor, groaning. The other 4 surged at once, but Dante's men intercepted them with brutal efficiency. Fists, elbows, knees, thuds and grunts filled the lounge as bodies hit the floor, scattering chairs and glass. It didn't take long. 30 seconds at most. 5 brothers in. 0 standing. Dante didn't spare them a second glance. He crouched down in front of the tallest one, gripping him by the collar. "You came into my place," Dante whispered. "You threatened a woman who asked for nothing except to be left alone." The man wheezed. She's lying." Dante tightened his grip. "Careful. Your next word decides whether you walk out or get rolled out." Silence. The man swallowed. Dante leaned closer. "You're going to deliver a message to Connor for me." The man nodded as best he could. "Tell him," Dante said softly, "that if he even thinks about touching her again, I'll remove what little dignity he has left." Lila's breath caught. She wasn't prepared for the intensity in Dante's voice, not rage, not bravado, but a deadly honesty. Dante released the man with a shove. "Get out," he said. His men opened a path to the door. The brothers stumbled out, dragging each other through the rain. Marco locked the door behind them. The lounge fell silent. For a long moment, Lila just stared at Dante, at the way he breathed, steady, unchanged, like the violence hadn't even touched him. He brushed dust from his knuckles, rolled his shoulders once, and turned to face her. His expression softened the moment their eyes met. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head. "No. I'm fine." "You were trembling." Her voice barely formed words. "I'm overwhelmed." Dante looked around the wrecked lounge, the broken table, the knocked-over chairs, shards of glass glittering across the floor. His men were already cleaning up, sweeping calmly, as if bar fights were part of the regular closing routine. He took a slow breath, then approached her with measured steps. "You shouldn't be out there alone tonight," he said gently. "I don't want to cause more trouble." "You're not causing trouble." He paused. "Other people are causing it for you." She felt her throat tighten. "People will think we're involved. That you're, I don't know, protecting me." "Are you worried about what people think?" Dante asked quietly. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm not." He stepped closer, leaving barely a foot between them. His presence wasn't overwhelming, it was grounding, steadying, like he was offering her something she hadn't felt in months. "Safety." "Why are you doing this?" she breathed. "Because you look like someone who hasn't had a single person in your life stand up for you in a very long time." She swallowed hard. "That still doesn't explain why you care." Dante hesitated. Only for a moment. Then he spoke. "There was someone once," he said, voice low. "Someone who looked the same way you do now. Bruised. Tired. Broken. And I didn't get to her in time." Her heart clenched. "Who was she?" He shook his head. "Not tonight." Lila didn't push him. She had enough of her own shadows. Everyone did. He gestured toward a booth. "Sit." Please. She obeyed, still shaken. Marco brought her a warm mug of tea, setting it down gently. Dante sat across from her, hands folded, watching her carefully. If Connor comes back, and he will, I want you to call me. I don't have your number. You will in a minute. Lila looked at him, searching for any hint of ulterior motive, any sign he was doing this for control or ego. But all she saw was calm certainty, and something else beneath it. Something she couldn't name. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. His jaw tightened. Lila felt her heartbeat jump. What's wrong? He stood without answering, motioning for her to stay seated. But Lila rose as well. Tell me, she insisted, the tremor returning to her voice. Dante turned to face her. Connor didn't go home, he said. He didn't even leave the neighborhood. Lila's breath stopped. He's not hiding, Dante continued. He's gathering more men. Her pulse pounded in her ears. Why? Dante's response was quiet, deadly calm. Because he didn't like the way I looked at you. She backed up a step. Then I should go. I shouldn't be here, this is my fault. I don't want to drag you into. Dante stepped close, his voice firm. Listen to me. Nothing happening tonight is your fault. But, no, his tone softened but stayed strong. Whatever he did, whatever he's planning, whatever he thinks he's owed, you're not responsible for any of it. Her breath shook. She wasn't used to anyone speaking to her like that. Not gently. Not protectively. Not as if her pain mattered. What do we do? She whispered. Dante exhaled slowly and looked toward the darkened windows, rain streaking down the glass. By midnight, he said quietly, every man he calls will be looking over his shoulder. Why? Dante met her gaze with an expression that promised both violence and safety all at once. Because I'm going to end this, he whispered. Once and for all. The storm outside grew harsher, wind slamming against the windows like fists demanding entry. Dante's men exchanged glances, not fearful, but alert, focused. They trusted him completely, moved at his slightest gesture. Lila noticed it. The way the entire room shifted around him. The way danger didn't make him anxious, it sharpened him. She wrapped her arms around herself, staring at the door as if Connor might burst through it again at any moment. Dante's voice snapped her back. Lila. She looked up. You're safe with me. Understand that. She nodded weakly, but her hands were still shaking. Dante noticed. Without a word, he removed his jacket, dark, warm, smelling faintly of cedar and smoke, and draped it over her shoulders. She stiffened. No man had touched her without anger or expectation in years. Not like this. Not with gentleness. Thank you, she whispered. He didn't answer. He was already analyzing the room like a chessboard. Every angle. Every exit. Every possible threat. Marco, Dante said. Lights lower. Curtains closed. Marco moved instantly. Stefano, check the alley. Matteo, call Rico and have him block the street. No one in or out unless I say. Lila blinked. Are you barricading the lounge? Dante's gaze softened. I'm keeping them away from you. A part of her wanted to argue. To insist she didn't need this kind of protection. But the bruise on her face throbbed, reminding her of the truth. She had been dealing with Connor alone for months. It hadn't made her safer. Marco handed Dante his phone. Boss, you need to see this. A video was playing. Lila's stomach dropped when she recognized the person in it. Connor. Soaked from the rain, pacing in front of a liquor store, talking directly into the camera. You think some fancy club owner scares me? Connor snarled in the video, phone trembling in his hand. He assaulted me. I'm pressing charges. And I'm not coming alone tonight. The man filming laughed in the background. Bro, chill. He'll see this. I want him to see it, Connor snapped. I want him to watch what happens when you mess with me. Dante's expression didn't change, not anger, not surprise. Just a deepening cold. Send me the location, he told Marco. Lila grabbed his arm. You're not going out there, are you? He looked at her hand on his sleeve. Why not? Because he's dangerous, she whispered. Dante stepped closer, lowering his voice. And I'm not? She tried to hold his stare but couldn't. He wasn't intimidating her, he was asking her to trust him. It scared her more than any threat ever had. Let me go with you, she said suddenly. No, Dante replied without hesitation. You can't go alone, I won't be alone, he said. But you're not coming. Why? Because he wants you scared, isolated, obedient. Dante's voice hardened. I'm not giving him that. Her eyes stung. He'll come after me again. Not after tonight. Her breath trembled. Dante, please don't get hurt because of me. He stared at her for a long moment, long enough that she felt her pulse trip over itself. Lila, he said finally, the only time I've gotten hurt in my life is when I didn't protect someone who needed me. She swallowed. Your voice sounds like you're not planning to come back. A shadow crossed his face. I always come back. Before she could respond, the back door opened and Stefano rushed inside, soaked, breathing hard. Boss, Stefano said urgently, you need to see the alley. Dante moved instantly, pushing the door open and stepping into the narrow alley behind the lounge. Rain hammered the pavement, trash cans rattling in the wind. Lila followed him to the threshold despite Marco's protests. A message was waiting for them. Spray-painted across the brick wall in dripping black letters, she belongs to me. Lila's breath froze in her lungs. Dante stepped closer, eyes narrowing. Stefano swallowed. This wasn't here 20 minutes ago. Dante's jaw flexed with tension so quiet and controlled it was more chilling than shouting. We have cameras, he said. Whoever wrote this, find him. Lila backed against the wall, panic surging. I need air. I can't, Dante turned immediately. Don't move. I'll take you inside. She shook her head. No. I can't be inside. Please. Not after seeing that. He stepped in front of her, blocking the message from her line of sight. Look at me. Her eyes lifted. Breathe, he whispered. She tried. She failed. He slowly lifted his hands, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. He placed them gently on her shoulders. I won't let him touch you again. I swear to you. Her pulse hammered against her ribs. She didn't know how to respond. The rain was icy, her skin was cold, but his hands were warm, solid, real. Why didn't you leave him sooner? Dante asked softly. She blinked, stunned. You think it was that simple? No, he said. I think it was complicated. And I want to understand. Her throat tightened. He wasn't always like this. At first he was charming, protective, sweet. Then he changed slowly. Then all at once. Dante nodded. That's how men like him operate. She swallowed. Every time I tried to leave, he said he'd ruin me. Make sure I never felt safe again. And you believed him, Dante said, not judging, just understanding. I didn't have anyone, Lila whispered. No family. No close friends. No one who would care if I disappeared. Dante's expression changed, quiet, devastating empathy. You have someone now. She looked up sharply. He didn't retract it. Didn't soften it. You have me, he said simply. And I don't abandon people. Before she could say anything, Matteo burst into the alley. He was pale. Boss, he said, voice shaking, Connor posted another video. Dante stiffened. What now? Matteo handed him the phone. The video showed Connor standing under a flickering streetlight, holding a familiar object in his hand. Lila's breath stopped. My house keys, she whispered. In the video, Connor dangled them by the keychain. Dante Valenti. Connor shouted. If you want her safe, come find me. Alone. Or I start tearing her life apart piece by piece. Lila stumbled back against the wall. He was inside my apartment? Matteo nodded grimly. He was. And he left a message there too. Dante's voice was low, dangerous. What message? Matteo swallowed. One word. Written on her bathroom mirror. Lila felt the world tilt around her. What word? She choked. Matteo hesitated. Mine, he whispered. Lila's knees buckled. Dante caught her before she hit the ground. His voice was no longer soft. It was lethal. He wants a war, Dante said. Tonight, he'll get one. He tightened his grip on her ribs, just enough to steady her, then let go. We'll take it to him where he thinks he's strongest, Dante said, voice cold as the alley. We'll show him that what he owns is only what he takes with permission. She wanted to protest, to say she didn't want him to risk himself for her, but the sight of the keys swinging like a taunt in Connor's video felt like a knife twisting in her chest. She nodded before she realized she'd moved. Back inside, Dante's men were already moving with methodical speed. They cleared the back rooms, checked the service doors, and rigged simple but brutal defenses. Barrels moved to block exits, crates wedged beneath doors, a lone metal chair set by the main entrance as a makeshift barricade. Marco and Stefano worked like clockwork, eyes sharp, every motion practiced. Lila watched them and felt a strange flutter of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in months, hope. Dante crouched by the counter, pulling a small black notebook from his pocket. He flipped it open to a page filled with names and numbers, a map of the neighborhood with X's and circles. He always traveled with a plan. Violence for him was never chaotic. It was architecture. Listen, he said. Matteo will go to the corner and watch for any suspicious movement. Stefano takes the back alley. Marco, lock the shutters and make sure the cameras are recording. I'll go to Connor's last known location. I want two of you with me, Rico and Paolo. No games. No one else. If I hear any sign of escalation outside this plan, you stop me. They nodded. No questions. It was the way they trusted him, blind, unshakable. Lila found it terrifying and comforting at once. You're not coming alone, she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. He gave a small, almost sad smile. I never go alone. They moved out into the rain in threes. The city seemed to hold its breath, even the sirens felt muted beneath the storm. Dante's SUV glided through wet streets, tires whispering. He drove with practiced ease, eyes flicking to mirrors, to every reflection. He was a man who had learned to read a city's heartbeat and anticipate its next twitch. Connor's Corner was on the edge of the neighborhood where the liquor stores stayed open late and neon signs hummed like fluorescent prayer. A group of men loitered under an awning, huddled against the rain. They scattered as Dante's car slowed. Dante stepped out first, coat collar up, hat pulled low. He walked with a casual gait that suggested he had all the time in the world. Rico and Paolo flanked him like shadows. They stopped at the streetlight and let their eyes sweep the area. There, by the flickering light, stood Connor. He looked smaller in person, thinner, the bravado in his voice stripped away by the cold wet air. He had a cheap lighter clutched in his hand like it was a weapon. His two friends, less confident, more nervous, bounced on their heels like caged animals. Dante didn't slow. He walked right up to Connor and stopped less than a breath away. You wanted me, Dante said softly. Connor puffed out his chest. You think you're going to scare me? You don't own. He stopped. Dante's presence was more suffocating than any threat, more precise than a gunshot. I'm taking my name back. Dante's smile was small and cold. From me? Connor swallowed, teeth chattering. From anyone who thinks they can hide behind a bar. Is that what this is about? Dante asked. Your pride? Your fear? Connor laughed, a noisy, brittle sound. I'll be the one who makes her pay. Rage flashed in Dante, an animal flash, instant and fierce. He reached out and took Connor's lighter from his fingers. The man's friends protested. Dante's hand tightened like a vice, and their noise died away. You want to make her pay? Dante asked, his voice folded in silk. Then tell me what you've already lost. Connor's defiance began to crumble. His face flushed with the shame Dante watched like a hawk. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. In the quiet that followed, Dante's men stepped closer, their forms filling the night like the promise of consequences. You touched her, Dante said simply. You hurt her. You thought it was yours to break. Connor spat at him. You don't know me. Dante didn't flinch. He seemed almost bored with the performance. He brought his face close to Connor's. Then tell me how it felt to think you could control another person's life. Connor's lip trembled. I didn't mean to, meaning doesn't matter, Dante said. What matters is what you did. Connor tried to pull away, but Dante tightened his grip. He pushed Connor forward, forcing him to kneel in the wet gutter, hands pressed to the cold concrete like a man willing himself to be punished enough to erase his guilt. You can stand up, Dante said. You can walk away and never come back. Or you can continue this life and see how long your pride keeps your hands clean. Connor's eyes pleaded for a route out that wasn't humiliation. He chose, with the fear of a cornered animal, to take the humiliation. He stood, voice small. Fine, he muttered. Fine. I'll leave. I'm sorry. Dante watched him until the apology felt real. Then he nodded to Rico. Get this on camera, he said. Make sure every one of his friends hears this. Rico pulled out his phone and recorded as Dante forced a public renunciation from Connor, an admission of guilt, a promise to stay away. It was humiliation by design. Connor's crowd would remember, and men like him cared more for reputation than truth. When it was done, Dante handed the lighter back to Connor. The man's hands trembled as he took it. Dante's voice was a cold coin. If you cross her again, and any man stands by, I will make sure there's nothing left of your reputation to buy you a second chance. Connor left without looking back. His two friends followed, shame and fear mixing on their faces like a bad stain. Dante finally turned to Lila. She stood under the same streetlight, her hair plastered to her temples, rain shining on her eyelashes like tiny diamonds. He had expected to see terror, but there was something else. For the first time, maybe, she looked like a woman who had been offered a choice. She walked to him slowly. Did you have to make him go through that? She asked. It felt like punishment. It needed to be public, Dante said. People like him hide in private. The public is the only thing they fear. She looked down at the wet asphalt. What if he comes back angrier? Then we're ready, Dante replied. But he won't come back alone. Men like him bring reinforcements. Men like him keep score. That's why you don't leave this alone again. The words landed heavy, and she nodded. He reached out and brushed a wet strand of hair from her face. It was a civil gesture, gentle and protective. For a fleeting second, something flickered in her, a fragile thread of trust. They walked back to the car together, close but not touching, the rain a steady percussion on the roof. Dante slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. He glanced at her. Why didn't you tell the police? He asked. She shook her head. I tried once. They wrote it down and looked at me like I was making up a story. Connor has friends there too. I was scared they'd blame me. You're not alone now, Dante said. You're with people who have no patience for that kind of cowardice. She leaned back in the seat, fatigue settling in like a second skin. What happens next? Dante's look was steady and almost tired. We make sure he never thinks he can do this again. We make sure everyone who's helped him understands the consequences. And we make sure you don't sleep another night afraid. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to let the weight lift. But the city had taught her the language of betrayal well. She'd been burned by promises before. Will they hurt him? She asked, voice small. Dante's jaw tightened. For a heartbeat, she saw something in his face that scared her, a man who had done worse than look into a man's eyes and demand accountability. We won't be the ones to teach him fear through pain unless we have to, he said. There are better ways to make a man disappear from someone's life than to break him. If you want me to cross lines, tell me now. If not, trust me to choose wisely. She considered his words, weighed them like coins. Finally, she exhaled. I don't want him broken. I just want him gone. Then he'll be gone, Dante promised. They drove back through the storm as the city pulsed, neon, rain, and the distant hum of a world that rarely noticed the small violences committed in its alleys. Yet tonight it had noticed. Tonight it had seen a line drawn. Tonight, a man named Dante Valenti had whispered a question that would change many lives. Who hurt you? He had asked it like he meant it. And now, as the SUV threaded its way through wet streets toward the safe refuge of the Valenti lounge, the city seemed to exhale. But exhale means rest, and rest, in their world, is often just the pause before the next storm. They pulled into the alley behind the lounge like ghosts, tires whispering on wet asphalt. The staff had already begun to tidy, the kind of clean that didn't pretend nothing happened, but that prepared for whatever came next. Marco met them at the back door with a tense nod. We had a tip, he said quietly. Connor and 2 others went to a storage unit on 3rd. Said they were meeting someone. Dante's fingers tightened on the steering wheel for a second before he eased into calm. Show me. The storage lot smelled of rust and damp cardboard, an unlit grid of metal doors and shadow. A single sodium lamp flickered in the distance, casting long, nervous shapes. Dante, Rico, and Paolo moved like rehearsed silhouettes, no running, no panic. Lila watched from the car, hands curled around the hem of her jacket. She had said she wouldn't come, but she hadn't been able to stay away. The city felt small and dangerous now, every corner a memory. She wanted the confrontation to be over, wanted to be able to breathe without scanning reflections for threats, but she also needed to see it end, to know someone else would carry the anger she had tired of holding. They neared Unit 42. 2 men lingered nearby with hooded heads, cigarettes burning down to quick white stumps. The muffled voices coming from within the unit were too low to be understood but close enough to make her skin prickle. Dante signaled. Rico cut the power to the far lights with a practiced motion Dante's crew had used 100 times in 100 different cleanups. Darkness folded around them like a cloak. It was an old trick, fear of the unknown doubled by the inability to be seen. They moved in. A metal door thunked as Paolo slipped the padlock free. The unit inside smelled of oil, old wood, and 1,000 small forgettings. Connor and 2 others were there, pacing like cornered animals. A man Lila didn't recognize stood in the back, leaning on a stack of crates, a slight hint of something official about the way he held himself, the way his jaw carried weight. Connor straightened when he realized he was not alone anymore. You again, he snarled. The stranger in the back smiled thinly. You called for backup, didn't you? Connor's face hardened. The rumor, the trap, Dante had expected as much. He stepped forward with a bluster that had only ever carried so far. That was the moment Dante moved. He didn't shout. He didn't make a show. He walked into the unit like a man stepping onto a stage he had set himself. He stood squarely between Connor and the crates, his presence compressing the room. Connor, Dante said calmly. You're in the wrong place. Connor lunged, but Dante's arm was an immovable wall. The first crash folded like a bad joke. Connor caught himself on the crates and tumbled, curse spilling from his mouth. Dante stepped in and shoved him down until the man was flat on the cold concrete, the grin rarely seen now gone thin and brittle. You think you can humiliate someone and then hide behind a few friends? Dante asked, voice low. You thought you could terrorize a woman and walk away. You thought you'd get to keep your life intact. Connor tried to scramble up, but Paolo's hand locked on his shoulder. The other men hesitated, then stepped back. They were not soldiers. They were scared. The stranger in the back approached, his steps measured. Up close, Lila could see why he had the air of authority. His coat was simple, but there was a neatness to him that said paperwork and investigation, not street revenge. He held out his hand, and in it was a badge. Not a police badge. Something that looked like a private investigator's insignia, a design that meant not the badge of the law but the kind that sometimes made the law listen. You called my number, the stranger said plainly. You hired me to make sure things looked bad for Valenti. Maybe to make him back down. Connor's eyes darted. I didn't, you did, the man interrupted. The paper trail led here. He nodded toward Connor. You've been posting videos, staging scenes, trying to get attention. Problem is, you chose a man who understands optics. Dante's voice was calm, pitiless. You've been using threats to manipulate people. You hurt someone who trusted you. That's on you. Connor's friends made a move to help him, but Rico's hand moved faster. Sit down, Rico said softly, like a parent telling a child to be still. Connor's bravado broke under the weight of every eye in the room. He was small there, no audience, no bar, no neon lights to amplify his ego. Tell him, Dante said, nodding to the stranger. Tell him to give back the keys. Tell him to apologize on camera. And tell him never to come near her again. The stranger pulled out his phone and began to record in a flat, unblinking rhythm. Connor's apology was forced and stuttering, but the image of him kneeling, admitting he had been wrong, would haunt him in the neighborhoods that fed his ego. Shame, more than pain, would be his teacher tonight. When it was over, the stranger placed a small envelope on the crate in front of Connor and slid forward. I'll make sure this goes where it needs to go. You got some help tonight from the wrong side. Don't make the same call next time. The man left with a curt nod and a soft rain began again outside, tapping the metal roof like an afterthought. Dante watched him go, then turned his attention back to Connor. You're leaving, Dante said. You're leaving the city. You're taking no calls. You're making no trouble. You disappear for a long time, and maybe, you can be a rumor someone tells their child as a warning. Connor's laugh, thin and worthless, came out small. You can't make me leave. Dante's answer was a look. It said he could, not necessarily through force, but by making the cost of staying far higher than the cost of leaving. He made staying an unbearable town hall of shame. He made the world small for Connor until every breath felt watched, until every friend was a thin reed of unreliable shelter. And for men like Connor, that was often worse than a bruise. Connor's last words as he left were a whisper, unheard by all but himself, a tiny flame of anger he'd be forced to keep fed in private. Dante watched until the door clanged shut and the storage unit felt empty and hollow again. On the drive back, Lila rested her head against the cool glass of the window and let the city blur. It wasn't perfect. The men who had once supported Connor might still harbor grudges. The world could turn sharp again at any minute. But something fundamental had shifted. The story that would travel this neighborhood tonight would be about accountability. It would be about a man forced to answer for himself in public light. That was often all a frightened person needed, a reminder that anonymity was a luxury abusers sometimes mistook for immunity. Back at the Valenti lounge, the staff cleaned with practiced efficiency. Glasses were set upside down in neat rows. Chairs were righted. The jazz hovered in the air as if nothing had happened, but the undertone hummed different, alert, watchful, careful. Dante poured Lila a cup of tea and pushed it toward her. She sipped slowly, feeling the heat spread through her bones like permission to exist without flinching. You okay? He asked quietly. She thought of the bruise, the mirror message, the lighter swinging like a taunt. She thought of shame, of the long nights she'd counted the minutes and rehearsed apologies she never wanted to say. I think so, she answered. For the first time, I don't feel like I'm pretending to be brave. Dante gave a small, almost relieved exhale. Good. They sat in companionable silence for a while. It felt like the kind of peace that had to be acknowledged gently, savoring it before the city reminded them of its perpetual friction. Will you stay? She asked after a while. Tonight. For a little while. Just so I don't have to walk back to an empty apartment. He looked at her with an intensity that made the room feel small. Yes. I'll stay. Lila's shoulders loosened. Thank you. The words felt like they carried a lifetime. In the coming weeks, Dante made sure the message was louder than Connor's threats. He arranged for neighborhood notices, anonymous, sharp, about the consequences of hurting others in those streets. He made sure the man who had filmed Connor's initial boast lost the audience he craved. He used influence sparingly, but precisely, a posted apology here, a job offer withdrawn there, a reputation quietly eroded until staying would cost more than leaving. It wasn't clean. It wasn't noble in the way courtrooms sometimes pretend justice to be. It was practical. It was effective. And slowly, like the city after a storm, Lila began to rebuild. She found a neighbor who offered to keep an eye on her hallway. She reconnected with a distant cousin who sent a message of hesitant support. She began to sleep without nightmares that paused her breath in the night. Month by month, the bruise faded. The memory of the night Dante had asked, "Who hurt you?" became a hinge in her life, a small, sharp thing she could return to when she doubted her ability to stand. One evening, as summer bled into the first chill of fall, Lila stood behind the counter of the Valenti lounge handing a drink to a regular and smiled, something at once wary and genuine. Dante watched from his booth, an unreadable expression softening only for a second when their eyes met. You did a good thing, she said later, quietly, when the bar had emptied and the jazz had dimmed. He shrugged, as if it had required nothing of him. Someone had to ask the question, he replied. Someone had to mean it. She nodded. The city outside hummed with lives continuing, some old, some new. Dante pulled a chair next to her as the last plates were stacked away. You're not alone anymore, he said. If ever you need me, you ask. She looked at him then, really looked, and a small, honest smile eased the tension from her face. I will.